Imagine being forced to leave your home, your job, your life. Not because you broke the law, but because of where your family came from. During the Great Depression, nearly 2 million people of Mexican descent were deported from the U.S. Many were U.S. citizens. This is the story of the 1930s Repatriation Programs. The 1930s were a time of economic despair in the U.S. The Great Depression left millions unemployed, and many Americans looked for someone to blame. Mexican Americans who had been recruited to work in the U.S. during the 1920s became scapegoats. Politicians and officials claimed that deporting Mexicans and Mexican Americans would free up jobs for real Americans. What followed was one of the largest forced migrations in U.S. history. The repatriation programs were a series of federal, state, and local efforts to remove people of Mexican descent from the U.S. Many were rounded up in raids, forced on the trains, and sent to Mexico, a country some had never seen. Officials didn't bother to check who was a citizen and who wasn't. Families were torn apart and communities were devastated. In total, nearly 2 million people were deported or pressured to leave. Among them were U.S.-born children, legal residents, and even veterans who had served in World War I. The government called it repatriation, but for many, it was exile. The impact of the repatriation programs was devastating. Families lost their homes, their livelihoods, and their sense of belonging. Many who were deported faced poverty and discrimination in Mexico, where they were seen as outsiders. Those who remained in the U.S. lived in fear, knowing they could be next. But even in the face of such injustice, Mexican American communities found ways to resist and rebuild. They organized mutual aid societies, fought for their rights, and preserved their culture, laying the groundwork for future generations of activists. The repatriation programs were a dark chapter in U.S. history, but they also sparked a legacy of resistance. Leaders like Bert Corona and organizations like the League of United Latin American Citizens fought for the rights of Mexican Americans and immigrants. Their work paved the way for movements like the Chicano movement of the 1960s and 1970s, which demanded equality and justice. Today, the echoes of the repatriation programs can be seen in debates over immigration policy, family separations at the border, and the treatment of undocumented communities. It's a reminder that the fight for justice is far from over. So what can we do? Learn this history. Stand up against xenophobia and discrimination in all its forms. And support organizations that are fighting for the rights of immigrants and their families. Because the story of the 1930s repatriation programs isn't just about the past. It's about the future that we're building together. So until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep making history. I'm Daryl Omar. I'll see you soon.